You're listening to the Inspired Mom MDs Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Cindy Van Prague. I help physician moms take back control of their time and energy so they can prioritize what matters most and thrive at work and home. In each episode, I bring honest conversations, inspiring stories, and practical strategies, including interviews with incredible women who are redefining success on their own terms. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inspired Mom MDs. I am with a special guest today. Her name is Dr. Lillian Emlet. She is a physician, educator, and certified professional energy leadership coach with over 15 years of experience in academic medicine. She is the founder of Transforming Healthcare Coaching and host of a podcast by the same name. It's for healthcare professionals and leaders who want to become a better version of themselves at work and in life. Lillian works with healthcare executives and clinical leaders to help them perform at the highest level without sacrificing their well-being or their team's culture in the process. As a long-time educator, simulationist, and Vital Talk distinguished faculty member, she brings deep healthcare experience to her coaching. Her mission is to help physicians and leaders tap into their full potential, especially those at critical career inflection points where growth requires courage. I am so excited to explore what it means for physicians to say yes to themselves and how you support their journey. I welcome you today.
It's so wonderful to be here.
Many women reach a point in their careers, I know I have, where something feels like it's shifting, not in a bad way, but as maybe an opportunity for growth. And today we're talking about how to recognize those moments and how to respond intentionally and what it means for women physicians specifically to say yes to themselves. And you help leaders perform and grow through these moments. When people come to you, what are they experiencing? What are the signs that they're noticing that they may be outgrowing a role or being stretched into something new?
Yeah, so part of it is obviously time and energy and capacity and excitement. I would say probably people either notice that the time becomes not aligned in the way they want. They begin to feel internal friction in terms of how much they have to give to who and when, in terms of what's fixed commitments and what are freer commitments. I would say also energy in terms of how much energy do they actually put into something and whether that really fulfills them. So, I mean, sometimes you do things and the energy is easy and it's fine. And it also doesn't fulfill you. Sometimes we really like easy and it's actually nice to have the stability of easy. So it really depends on how you see that moment. I would say probably those are the two things. And I think the other third thing is probably just a sort of restlessness, like a weird feeling like, I wonder what's next. I sort of feel like I've done what I needed to do here, and maybe this chapter needs to change, and I don't know what it is.
Right. And what the word that popped into my head as you were speaking was flow. Like sometimes you're just in the flow and it feels so good and feels so easy until you feel restless. I get that. So how do you help people distinguish between that restlessness, whether is it stress or is it really a moment of growth?
Yeah, so I think I just want to also name that growth is uncomfortable. And so I think people also have to be acknowledge that a lot of times we often throttle ourselves and don't even allow us to see the opportunity because at the end of the day, we when we remember what growth means, it means we actually have to be uncomfortable. And I think that is often something that people don't really recognize. I think when I've given the grand round talk about, are you of a growth mindset or are you a fixed mindset? Everyone 100% raises their hand. I'm the growth one. I'm the growth one. And at the same time, the reality is most of us really have a much more balanced portfolio between what is the outcome I'm trying to achieve and also how willing am I to be truly uncomfortable. And there's really a lot of people who think they want growth, but they actually just want sort of the end product without really doing the journey to get there. And I would say probably part of it is thinking through whether it's to determine whether it's stress or whether you do need that shift is the consistency of it. So I would say that if in every realm of life, especially in the one particular part that you're not satisfied in, because we may be satisfied in our spiritual, our relationships, our family, our health. We may be okay in other things, but there's just one
Mhm.
piece of the pie in life that is just sort of not right feeling. The question may be, usually most people will find a mentor, a sponsor, learn more things. They do what they can. And if it still isn't working and you are making progress and you've hit all of the marks, the most common is, I've done all the right things. So why am I not happier? It's
Yeah.
probably because you need to grow into something different and you're just really
Oh.
not listening to your internal values or internal exploration of things you never even tapped into, right? Because in some parts of our journey, you needed to put your nose down, work, and do the thing, learn the thing.
Mhm.
But then that means we put aside other values. And sometimes those other values need to come back to be able to be fully expressed.
Oh, I love that. They need to come full circle. Like for physicians, after putting medicine at the forefront for so many years, don't
Yeah.
forget your values.
Yeah. I mean, I can share my own story to some degree if people are curious. So creativity, I think I did not realize until I worked with my own coach several years ago through this journey of finding the shift, as you pointed out, of what the values were. I didn't even know. I remember beginning with my coach and realizing this is really sad. I'm 45 years old and I don't even know my own values. And it took a year almost of journaling and working through with a coach and really seeing where the patterns lay and going back and reflecting that the ideas and the symbols and the data was already there in my own lived experience. And through that, I
Mhm.
realized creativity was an important value. And I didn't really realize this is why I leaned so much into my simulation educator journey, because I love simulating and recreating what's real and to make learning in healthcare fun for all people. And I mean, obviously, I'm talking about like life and death things and like resuscitating and really things that are not considered fun. But I
Mhm.
want to use all that creativity to, either make things, do things, create environments that made it good for people to learn. So my creativity was expressed in that entire way. And it was only through that experience of working with my coach and discovering that value, I then pivoted into really going back to do things for me. Like many artists, they create not because of others. They create because they just need to. And so from there, I obviously then started the podcast and then started writing and I started a Substack. And I've done other things that fill my cup for the identity that I want to become, which is a
Mhm.
writer. And the rest is sort of history. And trying to figure out like what are the things that will be in alignment for your values in all the different ways you need to show up, whether that be at work or for yourself.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. And I didn't know that you're a writer too. That's so exciting.
Trying, aspiring,
Congratulations. Yeah.
trying. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Congratulations on embracing your value of creativity. Wow. So in a sense, you're saying yes to yourself and what you value, which is creativity. And but so many women in medicine are very well versed in saying yes to other people. We say yes to our patients, our spouse, our kids, institutions, gosh, colleagues, the list just goes on. But saying yes to yourself can feel really difficult. What does saying yes to yourself, as maybe just specifically a physician mom, look like in real life? It's easy to say in your head, I'll do it, but what can that look like for
Yeah.
our listeners?
Yeah, I guess I'll argue that, we in our coaching model describe this as a particular character of a certain type of energy leadership. The giving professions, the nursing, chaplainry, physicians, healthcare are all giving professions.
Mhm.
And the downside of this giving side is that you sometimes give too much and you don't have anything left for yourself. And I think everyone will recognize that analogy of the whole put your oxygen mask first before you can
Mhm.
help others. And I think the reality is, if you really cared about how you're performing on all the giving, if you don't have somewhere on your calendar that is just for you, and it can be micro moments, and most people with moms of very little children, it's the shower. It literally is the 20 minutes, even if the toddler's outside, they're
Mhm.
not in the shower with you. So that is still your time. And so I know of some moms and some coaches for women who really describe they really splurge on making that experience as wonderful for themselves. There's another coach I know who her philosophy is bringing joy back in. And she really talked about even going through a divorce and even going being a single mom, that the reality is there are some places where it is just for you. Another transition point I always tell people is when to meditate will be in the car. Those
Mhm.
5 minutes to warm up your car and just do what you want. Put your favorite music on, be in silence, say a
Yeah.
prayer. It's these little tiny things that we ignore. We just sort of just keep on pushing through, and there's no reason to push through because I can tell you 5 minutes is not going to hurt anyone. It's sort of the same analogy like we did in COVID, right? There is no emergency in a pandemic. And there's no, if your life is a pandemic and that's how you're feeling right now, because everything's turbulent, you
Yeah.
need to put your oxygen mask on first. We put our PPE on first. We are no good to the people in that room, the person dying, if we don't put on our protective equipment first. So you have to decide what your protective equipment is. And so the question is it just an oxygen mask? Is it just a tiny, like whiff of a perfume or like a little
Mm.
3 seconds writing in a journal or just reading your favorite poetry? You have to decide what it might look like to fill your spiritual cup for yourself before you can enter into that. And I would argue that a lot of times people try to do these long retreats,
Mm.
go away, big vacations. It's actually not that. It's actually frequency of dose. And so if, obviously all of us are clinicians, we understand that, yeah, the dose response and how much is the optimal dose changes. And if you do it more frequently and in smaller quantities, you are sort of proud of yourself, just like drinking water, right? Like people are very proud of themselves. They keep track of it and they're like, I drank my water. I did something for myself. I did my little exercise. I hit my steps on my little Fitbit watch. I got my sleep on my Oura ring. These small things add up. And once you notice you can do one thing, you'll keep on adding these habits.
I 100% agree. And you mentioned the small moments. So the small moments that fill my cup are silence. So that would be when I'm in the car alone. Well, maybe not silence. I put on my music. So when I arrive at work, I sit in my car and I'll listen to a meditation real quick. Or when I get home and I'm listening to music, I sit in the car for even just 2, 3 minutes and listen to that really awesome song and crank it up and just let it be. And so I hear you when you're talking about those moments, but you're saying what the woman listening, what is it that really gives you a thrill? What really helps you? And just find 2 or 3 minutes for that. I love your message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also will add on to that. Many of you probably have heard about improv. And one of the first fundamental lessons of improv is layering on into to amplify each other. And it's the
Okay.
yes and. And so yeah, I think, when you had posed the question, like what we give to our patients, our families, our partners, our
Mm-hmm.
kids, and where's the
Mm-hmm.
you, right? And so I think the reality is that means you're actually not complete. You're not done if you can't identify what small thing you can say that you've offered yourself each day.
Yes, and
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. For me, it was yoga this morning. So I figured
Mm-hmm.
I'd share that too.
Yeah. So I want to flip the script a little bit. Instead of saying yes, why do they often say no to opportunities that can really expand them or help them? So for example, let's say they have an opportunity to work on a project that is really kind of thrilling and exciting, but they say no because they don't have time. And it's just so easy to say no. I'm not going to go there and I'm not going to go there. But really, those opportunities could have brought them great
Yeah.
growth. Why is it just so easy to say no to those things?
I think most people are guilty of, most women can identify with that. And I think there's probably two things. One is they feel like the plate is already very full. And so if I'm going to put something else on it, they understand the quality may suffer. And they
Mhm.
also understand that they also don't want to give anything up. And so
Mm.
I think anytime someone says no, there's probably two main things that are happening. One is that you have a very accurate assessment of exactly your capacity, your performance, what you require, your yes, you're already doing those things. You're like, I got a perfect balance and I am not ready for growth right now. In fact, I don't want the growth.
Mm.
It's just not the right time. And the question will be is for those people, do you just put a deadline for yourself? I'm going to revisit this in next quarter. I call this the time limited trial for like if your own life is like a critical care intervention, let's just see how this quarter goes. But I will potentially revisit this and actually try this treatment modality in a couple weeks and see. So that's one option because your assessment could have been correct. The
Mm.
other people are actually internally, it's much harder to get to, but the other people who say no are often internally don't actually have the belief that they want to go there or they want to do this or they're somehow not feeling enough in some way. And therefore, to me, like their mindset is not of an opportunity mindset, that they're
Mm,
currently operating from a place like, this is good enough. I'm fine where I am. I'm no longer in danger and I'm good with just cruising. And and in our energy leadership model, it's like either you're just like cruising and surviving versus you're giving. And at this point, when you're in the giving mode, you're just giving. You're not really seeing for new opportunities. So it makes sense that you wouldn't
true.
choose something new. And then only when you're really at your next higher level of being is then you actually say, like, there's actually more I can do. Even if I might want to suffer quality or maybe just change my direction, that there
Mhm.
is more out there that I can accomplish or do. And so I think a part of it is mindset. So to me, those are the two big buckets I probably would divide the situation into.
And that goes back to growth mindset, right? I'm really curious about this next topic about the next generation of physicians. And I know you teach them. What patterns do you see in early career physicians that concern you? You have your finger on the pulse. I'm curious what you see.
Because I think the one thing for earlier career is we've grown up to some degree, unfortunately, in the pandemic. And so the reality is there is a sort of expectation now that because we pivoted so heavily to a virtual and
Mm,
hybrid state, that much of life will remain in that sort of hybrid or virtual, and that's acceptable enough. And they're not
mhm,
completely wrong. And so I think the question is, how do we design workplaces that allow for that? And also, I think they're also much more willing to not know what's considered okay, truth, reality, best practices. They're willing to augment and not really use internal memory and knowing, and instead much more willing to be like, well, there's all kinds of data for this. There's an app for this, and I should have an external resource. And there's a pharmacist who can tell me these things. So they're much more okay, and there isn't sort of a foundational like when we were trained.
mhm,
Our professors taught us deep intuitive clinical acumen, making sure that a marker of performance and wisdom was having some degree of judgment and slowing things down so that we actually got the correct data so we can make the right thing and work with patients to be able to make the right decisions. And
mhm,
now this generation has like 20 million times more data points than we ever had to deal with, or even what our professors had to deal with. And
mm,
so now, I mean, it's understandable that they don't know what to trust. They don't know what's real. It's harder to do things in real life versus hybrid and versus virtual. It's hard to distill what's really important, and it's not going to get any better necessarily with AI. I can already begin to see how the practice of healthcare will change, even just with having easier ways to process that volume and distill it. The question
mhm,
will be is whether we can keep up with emphasizing critical thinking, right? Because I think that doesn't go away no matter who you are or what industries. I think the skepticism is not always a bad thing. Skepticism means like, well, let's talk it through, let's think it through, let's have a conversation, and let's slow down what we're processing rather than just making a quick judgment and just moving on. Another colleague of mine had actually expressed that some of the learners currently actually didn't want him to explain physiology or didn't want him to
oh,
explain things. Yeah,
oh,
right.
that
There was
hurts my
no
heart. Okay.
dialogue, right?
Oh,
Dialectical learning is sort of like, where is it going? They people just wanted an answer. But
oh,
I think that's the question. It's going to be finding this new balance of do we understand? And I worry and I wonder, like even for me, while all of these AI things are great shortcuts,
mhm,
they make me produce things faster, but then
mhm,
now we have to change our skills to editing. So even in my writing, like I've become a master editor because there is so much just jumble of words out there because of all of the
mhm,
outputs these things can make.
mhm,
And then you start to understand, do I know my fundamentals? Which is why I really appreciate some of the early childhood educators. The early childhood educators, they still very much are focused on, do you understand the process, the structure, the composition? Because if you don't know that, then you're not going to be able to tweak and play. So same like with
mhm,
artists, right? They're gonna like still worry about technique because if you don't worry about technique first, so then you can't really make shortcuts. Similar to,
mhm,
I think, expertise development, right? So in the beginning, it's slow, it feels a little clunky, then you get a little
mhm,
better, and then you have blind spots. Once you become an expert, like, right, we both are in our peak prime, we're senior faculty at this point. We actually have blind spots. And so
yeah.
I think that's the question is making sure that we all have better critical thinking skills.
Hmm. That begs the question, how do we teach that to the next generation?
That's
How
a
do,
question I don't think I have a full answer yet to.
yeah, yeah.
That's the thing I've been sort of pondering on. So in my
Mm-hmm,
Substack, I always like go back to try to think about what cognitive theories are already out there and
mm-hmm,
then how that's applying in real life and what's changing. So I do wonder how it's going to end up looking.
mm-hmm.
I do think that we need to return to dialogue and Socratic method and thinking through and also seeing whether you can explain things. Well, even like what's great is that, if AI can make your bullet points faster, can you explain it? Do you understand it? I
Yeah.
think some of those things won't totally go away. I think the other question too will be is how we measure performance is, and then how often do we do the reps? I think
Mm.
there is a desire that people do want to feel good in the practice of healthcare and having more opportunities to do different things. I think that is a chance for us to refresh, revisit, re-question, have the dialogue, practice again as a team.
And it goes back to the basics. But I think that's an interesting point. If you change how they're evaluated, they'll aim for different markers. And if the markers are based on, like you said, the Socratic method, then that's where they'll go.
I
Yeah.
do wonder
You wonder.
whether, a knowledge-based fact, that's not the correct marker anymore. It's going to be
Right.
the process. And so even the
Yes.
question of we often have not, like there's process outcomes. Have we even looked at that? And I don't think we
Mm-hmm.
have, right? If you look at most like medical schools, they use problem-based learning, case-based learning, team-based learning. There are ways to look at team performance and team contributions and are people interacting, providing core information. And so I think even how we measure teams often are about were the paths applied? Was the medication given? Did you give closed loop communication? There's all kinds of things that we're measuring that which are outcomes and not
Mm-hmm.
process. And so I think
Right.
it will be interesting to have a shift in emphasis of are we more meta aware of those things that are happening?
Well, I am so grateful that you are involved in teaching them and that you are aware of this. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of people, thinking
yeah.
throughout the country about how AI is being used in medical education. But I do worry that we're all worrying about the wrong thing, which is about shortcuts and faster and
Mm-hmm.
productivity
Mm-hmm.
and things like that, rather than how we interact as humans with the machine, which I think the reality at the end of the day is, I think we all agree that we interact with technology. That's okay. But the question is when and how does it make us better? And some people
Mm-hmm.
have already begun, like there are some students at Stanford who really have already talked about the fact that how they use the AI to be a never-ending questioner, like keep asking them questions. And so in many ways, they've allowed the bot to help them learn, which is good.
Mm, true. Oh, yeah. No, I don't deny that there's so much value in AI. It's evolving week by week. So we'll
Yes,
see where
yes,
it
but
takes
every
us
day.
in
Every day
medicine.
it's crazy, a new
It's
model.
every hour.
Yes.
I'd love to talk about your coaching real quick. I know most of your time is spent teaching, but you do carve out time for coaching. Can you define what is energy leadership coaching? What does that mean?
Yeah, so energy leadership is a model of how where I trained the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. They have a proprietary assessment tool which looks at the seven levels of energy. And so
Okay.
briefly, it's sort of how we react in any given moment and is a very fluid measure. So unlike the DISC, which is a personality, the Myers-Briggs was also personality, those are
Mhm.
static and really won't change. Principles
Mhm.
U, there's several personality tests. One would could argue even like the Clifton Strengths Finder, it also tends to be a little more static
Mhm.
compared to the energy. And so the thought is if you're at your ideal state and you take this assessment, it categorizes what your ideal state of energy is, sort of like the beginner expression of what your values might be, but
Mhm.
it's how you're energetically showing up in the areas of life as you're taking the test, as compared to when you're not, when you're triggered, not well, traumatized. And it sort of gives you a sense of like what your reaction pattern responses are so that you can consciously choose how you want to show up. Because I think a lot of people really have a hard time expressing exactly that movement from I just need to hide, someone just hurt me, someone hurt my feelings, I'm attacked. We all come with our own unique lenses, lived experiences, culture, gender that influence how we see things. And we're going to react a certain way. So we talk about the lower levels of energy, what we call catabolism, and then higher levels of energy where we're feeling creative, fulfilled, giving, looking for opportunities, and then also in touch with our own inner self, a more divine being. And then also at the highest level of energy, we are one with the world and we actually feel like we're good with nature and other people and society. So there's that sort of like conceptually like the two halves of things. And then we begin to look through those seven levels of energy in this assessment. How can we consciously choose to move up a level? Because almost in every moment, I'm sure as you also coach, there's always a time between the stimulus and the response.
Mhm.
What are you going to do in that gap? What will you choose? How do I want to be? And if we often are just reactive, we're down in our lower levels of energy. And that's normal. Those lower level energies are to protect you. I'm not saying we should slow down everything because if you put your hand on a fire stove, you should pull it back very quickly. And
Mhm.
that's actually a good thing.
Right,
But
right.
at the same time, most things are not meant to be like that. Society and the way we work in the hospital is not meant to be that triggering. There is always an opportunity in your own self leadership, which then translate into your team leadership, which then translates into your organizational leadership. So we really train leaders to think of themselves as I mean, everyone leaves a group because of their boss. And so we need leaders that are more human, well, and whole and leading a more well life so that they have the capacity and the energy to care for the people, which is their team, the clinical
Mhm.
team. And once the clinical team is cared for, then they have a fighting chance to actually do patient care. I think we have often in medicine talked so much about the patients.
Mhm.
We understand that the patients are very important. But I think what we forget in the healthcare organizations is the most important people in those buildings are all the humans that are running around as employees. Those people, if they're cared for and nurtured and given professional development throughout their entire career, they'll stay, they'll become loyal, they'll be cared for. You can prevent things happening. You don't need as much EAP budget. You can actually, begin to groom and cultivate for people to stay and give them learning opportunities for them to diversify within your organization. And so those are the things that we talk about with our leaders that come to us for their coaching. Because first it starts with usually a division chief or a nurse manager or a department chair. And then from there, they're like, the light bulb goes on. And then they
Mhm.
begin to figure out how can we work with their teams to be more strategic for growth rather than people, the churn rate is not normal. The fact that departments or healthcare churns, that if an organization has a particular rate of people turning over, that's not a good thing.
Hmm. Thank you for that explanation. That sounds perfect. How can people reach you if they're interested in that?
My favorite way is actually via LinkedIn, but
Okay.
if you're not on LinkedIn and you're listening to this, I can be reached at hello@transforminghealthcarecoaching.com. And those are probably the two easiest ways. Just shoot me an email and we can set up a 30-minute call and we can just hear about sort of the things you're struggling with and what you're wondering about. And then depending on the match, we have several coaches in our company that have different areas of expertise. So if you're a nurse, we have physicians, PTs, OTs, a PA. We have different professions. So we actually coach the
Mhm.
interprofessional team as well, in addition to individuals. But we always start with the individual because the individual leader is the most important person on that team. And if they can't embody and support this energy leadership growth, then going right to the team isn't going to be helpful.
Right, right. Love that. Lillian, thank you so much for being here. I know we're out of time and I have so many more questions for you. Maybe if you come back in the future, we can
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking with like-minded people who are also interested in people's growth, and especially as a
Mhm.
mom, as a woman physician as well. We are the ones at greatest risk for burnout. We carry so much for everyone, and is what you're doing with Inspired Moms MD is really important in terms of making sure the backbone. Over 50% of our medical students are women, and so we need to
Mhm.
have a great, sustainable career path forward for everyone. So thank you
Right.
so much for all the work that you do.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for tuning in today to the Inspired Mom MDs podcast. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with a friend who might benefit too. And I'd be so grateful if you left a review so other women can find me too. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn and explore free resources at inspiredmommds.com. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and isn't a substitute for medical advice or care. I'm a board-certified physician, but this content isn't connected to my clinical practice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed here. Please always talk to your own health professional about any mental or physical health concerns. And as always, take what helps and leave the rest. See InspiredMomMDs.com for full disclaimer.